Good morning, my lady. We're going to begin today's evidence by calling Sam Smith-Higgins. May she be sworn, please?
I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that
the evidence I shall give
shall
be the truth,
be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, please.
Okay, thanks.
Hello again.
Hello.
Welcome back to the inquiry. You gave evidence in Module 4 about the experience of your father, Phil Smith, and you're here today representing COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice Cymru. You should have before you two witness statements. The statement that you have provided on behalf of the organisation, which is at INQ 000659784, and also a personal impact statement, which is at INQ 000659950. Can you confirm, please, that those are the statements that you've provided for Module 10?
They are.
And that they are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
They are.
Thank you very much. I'm going to concentrate, if I may, on the evidence that you've given on behalf of the organisation, although from time to time I know that you may want to provide examples from your own experience of being bereaved. The organisation, you tell us in your witness statement, is a collection of people who are all personally bereaved, who have been left shocked and scared by their experience with COVID. And you say, at first we thought we were just unlucky, then we discovered so many others in Wales had also lost loved ones in hospital and care homes in similar devastating circumstances. You say that your experience of bereavement has been shaped by Wales-specific circumstances and that the members of your group have decided to use your grief in a positive way. I can see that you're nodding. If you agree with what I'm saying, could you say yes, please?
Yes,
For
I
the
do.
record. Thank you very much. And you go on to say that you are or have been reluctant campaigners, but you've been brought together by mutual grief and the inability to get answers. And you tell us that from time to time, representing the Welsh bereaved has been gruelling. And that I know from the change in the way in which the group has now become formulated, that you have been reduced from 5 founding members and leaders down to 2, so yourself and one other. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. But you go on to say it's a privilege to represent the COVID bereaved in Wales because you feel that you are representing many of those who don't feel able to speak for themselves because going through the bereaved evidence that you have looked at throughout the course of your representation has at times been re-traumatising in itself. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. During the course of your evidence, we're going to touch upon limitations on physical contact, on the uncertainty about the treatment of loved ones, and about restrictions on communication with loved ones. And we're going to look from time to time at some of the evidence that's been provided to the Every Story Matters exercise, both by Welsh people and by people across the UK. At paragraph 14 of your statement, you tell us about the first wave of COVID and how the speed at which the pandemic hit shocked people and they felt that they were uninformed by what was happening. Did your members tell you that they were affected by the lack of communication that they felt at the beginning of the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, families kind of expected a certain amount of chaos. It was something sort of new. But the actual level of chaos, I don't think was expected. You speak to families who lost loved ones in that first wave, and it was, people have used the words kidnapped. That's how they felt. Their loved ones were kidnapped going into hospital or a care home. And I was talking to a family, a new family who came forward a few weeks ago, and they said to me on the phone, she said, listen, I feel embarrassed telling people this story, but I feel like as though my dad was in a soft hostage situation. And that really struck a chord with me, those words, soft hostage, because, that's exactly how I felt about my dad. And her saying that brought up so many memories of stupid things that I did while we couldn't get to see him. My daughter's a criminal barrister, and we had a photo of her with her wig and gown. And I sent that into the hospital and sent it up to my dad. And I told my dad, you tell everyone she's a medical negligence barrister. And, she's not, no, she's criminal. The stupid things that you thought of at the time, for me to do that, he really felt like as though he was in that hostage situation, and it's...
So the lack of contact was something that was felt really keenly. And also, you tell us that the lack of information. So you describe the silence from the hospitals and care homes was deafening.
Yeah.
So a lack of communication as well.
Absolutely. My dad was the type of bloke who actually enjoyed going into hospital. He enjoyed the camaraderie and chatting to people. And he was the one on the ward who made sure that everybody on there was able to feel communicated with. He added their family and friends to his Facebook profile so that he could ring them and contact them.
Yes.
He was doing stepping in for what a family or staff should be doing for patients.
And you tell us that many of your members, facing that situation of their loved one going into hospital and not understanding what was happening, felt too scared to ask questions.
Well, yeah, again, it goes back to this soft hostage situation whereby, do you kick off, or are you going to get better results by being compliant and nice about it? And that's totally how you felt. You were ringing to get answers, you weren't getting them. And, I'm a kick-off kind of girl. And I did that and went through all the channels, and I ended up having the director of nursing as a personal contact on my phone. And so for me, I was able to get things done pronto and quickly. But other families weren't that kick-off sort of person. And it also was a real disadvantage to patients or people in care homes who physically weren't able to get around themselves.
Yes.
If you were fit and able, you could go out and meet your family. If you couldn't, you were totally reliant. It really was a soft hostage situation.
Moving through into wave 2, you tell us that wave 2 felt different at first, but in fact it became worse because there were a number of decisions which you say exacerbated and prolonged bereavement that had taken place already. And you go on to say this, that COVID bereavement often begins before death. What do you mean by that?
A lot of people were petrified when their loved ones were going into hospital. Myself, I kind of knew when my dad went into hospital that the chances were he was going to catch it. He was scheduled to go in for 2 weeks of treatment. On the final day that he was supposed to be released, he had that. So when you are diagnosed with COVID, nobody explains to you what is going to happen. Nobody explains to you that actually it's a really horrible death that can take 3 to 4 days to happen. You're not there, you're not having those conversations. And so the impact, and then afterwards, when they have died, the impact is totally different to a normal bereavement because they've actually caught that COVID in the hospital. So the people you're looking to for explanations and sympathy, you're actually angry with.
Yes.
So, you know, one of the recommendations we make is that more training needs to happen on bereavement. But one of the specific things is that training needs to look at nosocomial infection because it is a totally, as somebody bereaved from nosocomial, it's totally different. You do feel angry.
Yeah.
And
that's I'm so sorry, but that's COVID caught in a hospital setting, isn't it?
Yeah. Or a care home, any healthcare setting. You have a total different set of emotions. You're not there hugging the staff and thanking them for all their help. You're feeling angry. And you walk away in the circumstances of COVID with a bag of stuff you've got to destroy or open up a few weeks later. And that's it.
Well, let's look at the Every Story Matters record, please. And we can see it at 000659894, just to look at some examples of what you've described. Thank you. And let's go to page 8 and highlight, please, paragraph 3, if we can. Thank you very much. Pandemic restrictions meant many people were unable to be with their loved ones at the end of their life. In some cases, this meant the last time they saw their loved one was when they were taken away in an ambulance or before they went into hospital or a care setting. Many bereaved people experience ongoing and profound feelings of anger, sadness and guilt that they could not be with or comfort their loved ones at the end of their life. The pandemic impacted the ability of families and friends to conduct funerals, burials and end-of-life ceremonies in line with their wishes, including cultural and religious practices. Contributors told us how the uncertainty about what happened to their loved ones in their final days was heartbreaking, often leaving them with many questions about their death. And we can see that a bereaved daughter from Wales said, "The pain and stress we are all going through. I can't live life not knowing how our mum died or knowing how we can find out those answers. It's hell not knowing why she died. It's frustrating and soul-destroying not knowing answers to questions we have, and we can't even grieve properly for her." And were those the sentiments that your members were telling you about as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot to break down there.
Yes.
You know, the fact that funerals were impacted was just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. You know, they're important funerals and those rituals that you go through. And, you know, we've heard from our families that children were having to decide amongst themselves who could visit and what have you. But there's so many other things that you don't hear about. I'm sure you've heard many stories about funerals and no contact and no hugging and everything. But, you know, for my own circumstances, my dad chose a direct cremation. And that was absolutely... So having not seen him for a month before he died, then because he'd chosen that route, he was stored in a freezer for 3 weeks before I kicked off, until they could gather enough bodies in that area to take them off to Kent to cremate them. You don't know what day he was being cremated or what time or anything. And then 3 weeks later, a van pulls up with the cremation company's name on it. A chap gets out in a black polo shirt and hands me a shopping bag with like a cornflake packet in it almost, hands me a shopping bag and asks me to have a photograph taken for proof of delivery. And I was kind of, I think in this photo, I'm laughing my head off because I thought this is just so my dad. So that photo exists somewhere. There's also sort of like, you know, they went to watching funerals online.
Yes.
And we wanted to attend the funeral of my brother-in-law's dad. And, that's awkward in itself. What do you do? We went upstairs and sat quietly in a room and pressed play and started watching it. And halfway through, we realised that this was... why are they singing You Never Walk Alone? What's this? Liverpool? He wasn't nothing to do with Liverpool. They'd sent us completely the wrong link. We were watching some poor chap in Liverpool, and I burst out laughing, but my husband felt duty-bound to sit through the whole service to watch it. So there's so many things that went wrong with funerals.
And I think also that was compounded, you tell us in your statement, because of a lack of ability to see your loved one before the funeral. And the inability to choose what they would wear when they were buried or cremated. And can we just have a look again, please, at Every Story Matters, because there's another example of this at page 40, please. Thank you. If we can highlight the fifth paragraph. Thank you. We also heard how some people could not see their loved one's body ahead of the funeral, burial, cremation, or other end-of-life ceremony. When loved ones had died alone or with only a few visitors, not being able to see the body meant some people were left in disbelief or denial about the death, making it even harder to accept what had happened. And then a bereaved wife from Wales told the exercise, "They told me that I couldn't see my husband in the hospital. He was going into a body bag straight to the undertaker. I asked the undertaker, and in fairness, with the undertaker, I said to him, 'Oh, what do you need, like, dress-wise?' And he said, 'Well, he's got to stay in the gown that he died in. We're not allowed to open up the body bag, so his body bag's gone straight into the coffin.' So I wasn't allowed to see him, and to be honest with you, even now, sometimes it's like, I know this might actually sound absolutely crazy. Have they kidnapped him? Has he really gone? Because I've not gone through that process of seeing the body." And is that something that your members were expressing to you, that almost the disbelief that the person had gone?
Absolutely, absolutely. I was talking to a chap I've just met here this morning, and he lost his wife at home through COVID, and, no inquest, no post-mortem even, and even just writing out the tags to put on her in front of him, and all of this with funerals. Funerals are so important that actually, the same as visiting in hospital, we were told you can't visit in hospital. Well, why not? Because actually, if you'd had the right ventilation and you'd had the right masks, there was no issue whatsoever. When we all finally got into a hospital, the air in there was just, if anybody's ever been on a hospital ward at meal times, it's disgusting. And they need to be ventilated. You need to bring in regulations for air quality inside hospitals, 100%. That needs to be backed up by law. And the same with funerals. That public buildings need to be safe places for people to go. You cannot change the behaviours of people when you can quite easily change the behaviours of the public spaces. You can change those. It costs a lot of money until people start suing for hospital-acquired COVID or care home-acquired COVID or catching COVID in public buildings. Nothing will probably happen. That's why it needs to be made into law.
Yes, thank you. That's certainly one of the recommendations that you put in your statement. I'd like to ask you some questions now about the evidence in your witness statement on prolonged grief and long-term emotional consequences. And let's look, please, at the Roundtable Summary Report on funerals, burials and bereavement. Thank you. And turn, please, to page 12. And can we highlight, please, the first half of this page? Bereavement support organisations said these experiences have led to an increase in cases of complex grief, where people continue to experience intense, lasting symptoms of grief for a long time after their loved one has died. This is often accompanied by persistent sadness and rumination about the loss. Bereaved family campaign groups spoke about how many of their members have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, with some experiencing suicidal thoughts following pandemic bereavement and its associated isolation. Bereaved family campaign groups agreed that they felt ignored by the governments of the UK during and following the pandemic, and that this had contributed to their sense of isolation by making them feel unimportant. The representative from COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice Cymru highlighted the lack of an official COVID-19 memorial, a minute's silence or event in Wales. This meant that members felt that their loved ones and the impact of their loss had not been acknowledged or recognised by their government as a public tragedy. Campaign leads described how many of their members to this day cannot accept what has happened and process their emotions, given their lack of closure and postponement or suppression of their grief during the pandemic. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about memorialisation a little bit later, but concentrating on the complex grief or prolonged grief that your members have felt. What have they explained to you that they think has led to that, and how has that exacerbated the feelings of grief that one might expect to feel outside of the pandemic experience?
As a group, we all feel we're strong people,
Yes.
and we've all been bereaved before. And I think what the message that's coming across is the lack of information that we received. There's so many questions that remain unanswered. You know, it's 5 years on for me personally, and I've questioned, why aren't I just walking away and moving on with my life? I've even questioned, have I got daddy issues, you know, and it's sort of like, no, I really haven't. There's just a fight to find out what went wrong. And now I kind of know what went wrong, and I still haven't got answers or any reassurance that things have been changed. And I think for a lot of our families, that is what drives them on. And looking at that triangle that public health bodies used, where it was it 60% of people will get over their grief, and then 30% will need help, and then 10% will get this post-traumatic grief disorder. You know, why that model was used during a pandemic is nonsense. I would say that the 30% who need the help never had it. We certainly never had it. I sought help in about a month after my father died. I couldn't even open my mouth, and I carry stress in my shoulders and my jaw, and I had locked jaw completely, couldn't eat, couldn't drink, couldn't move my jaw. Went to the doctors, and they referred me to the counselling service within the health board. After about 6 weeks, I had a phone call, and they said, oh, I can understand why you're upset. I was in the hospital ward at that time. It was chaos, absolute chaos, the things I saw. Anyway, you don't need counselling from us. You need grief counselling. So you contact a grief counsellor, and they say, well, it's too soon. You need to wait a good few months. You're going through the normal stages of grief. And there was nobody who would help with bereavement support at all. And as I say, you know, we've worked as a group to get bereavement support put into hospitals in Wales. But actually, if you've had somebody die from a nosocomial infection, that's the last place you want to go to for help. So I really think that needs to be acknowledged as a factor. You know, I'm no longer angry with the health board, but at the time, I was furious.
Yeah. And is one of the other experiences that your members have spoken to you about, the guilt that they felt about the death of their loved one, and how they've carried that throughout
Absolutely,
the
yeah.
period of grieving.
And that's I can totally, that's what keeps me awake at night. That's what makes me grind my teeth, because I genuinely feel I did do enough for my dad. I know that deep down, but I wasn't there. I didn't see him. I don't know what happened. I didn't ask when he was diagnosed with prostate cancer in the first week of lockdown,
Yes.
and they wrote it on his notes, but didn't tell him. I wasn't there for that appointment. There's so many things that actually we have no answers to. There is no apology. There is no, and this is where Welsh Government have really annoyed us as well. And I know this is not, but it is an impact, because instead of being open, there's been a very defensive sort of culture.
Reaction, yeah. Well, we will come back to
Yeah.
look at that. But before we do, let's just look at another couple of examples of people feeling guilt. Every Story Matters, please, and page 8 and on to page 9. We can see that many contributors said they felt like they had let their loved one down because they couldn't speak up for them and support them in the way they normally would. They described replaying decisions in their mind and asking themselves whether they could have done something differently at the end of their loved one's life. This guilt and regret has made it incredibly difficult for many bereaved people to process their grief. And we can see there a bereaved daughter from Wales said, "My sister and I will always have to live with the guilt that a vulnerable elderly person should be allowed to die alone, to be deprived of her daughters, the only people that she still recognised and that she relied so heavily on for her daily care. We thought the hospital was the safest place for her, but it wasn't. We still struggle with the guilt and grief every day. I'm so sorry that we let her down." And then if we can go, please, to page 26 and have a look at Cara's story. Thank you. Cara's mum and dad both contracted COVID-19 and were taken to separate hospitals where their health rapidly declined. Cara was unable to visit either of her parents and received very little communication from the hospitals. She told us how helpless she felt. Not being able to be there, it was the helplessness of not being able to do anything, the loss of control and power, which was really awful. Cara's mum died within a week of being in hospital, and her dad just 5 days later. The sudden death of both parents felt surreal. It's sudden, completely unexpected. If it's caught in hospital, you thought your loved one would be safe, obviously. So it's like it was completely avoidable. You're angry. It's unjust and surreal, completely surreal. 1 minute my parents were fine, living their own life, and the next minute, less than a month later, they're both dead. Cara told us how she had been left with an overwhelming sense of guilt, constantly replaying the decisions she made and unanswered questions about what happened. These what-ifs play on your mind. Yes, did you do the right thing by saying you've got to contact the hospital? Would they have been better off if they'd just died at home? They suffered in hospital alone. So all these things play on your mind. You ruminate over this. There are just so many unanswered questions. You didn't know what happened in the hospital. She was left with an intense fear that she might also catch the virus and die. Her feelings were overwhelming and led to thoughts of self-harm and suicide. The sense of overwhelm that I felt with all these factors going on, and I was shielding as well. So I was like, obviously my parents died from COVID, and I'm terrified of catching anything. I did have thoughts of suicide and harm. I'd never in my life experienced thoughts of self-harm. It was incredibly scary. Cara told us how she has felt unable to process her grief. It feels like my parents could just still be living out there somewhere. I'm still stuck in like a long state of bereavement. I mean, I can get on with day-to-day life, but when I think about everything that's happened and try to find out what went on, going through hospital complaints, getting records, reading medical notes, I was all caught up in that for maybe 2 years. And when they went, did I grieve? I don't know. Have I? I'm not sure. Again, several parts of that to unpick, perhaps.
It really is, and it just sums it up. This guilt, and you know, now you feel guilty for feeling guilty for still grieving. You know, it's like time has passed now. We should all be moved on from this, but it just felt like a constant battle at the time, and I keep going back to that soft hostage situation, which just sums it up for me. That's exactly how I felt. My mum had a stroke in the November 2020, and you know, we couldn't get an ambulance, so we ended up wheeling her down to a different hospital because I wouldn't go to the hospital within our normal health board because of what had happened to my dad, distrust, yada yada. So drove to a different health board. Pulled up outside. I'd had to ring ahead. They were expecting her. My mum was like collapsed in a chair, and they wheeled her off, and they said, "You can't go in." And I said, "Well, I'm a carer. Of course I can go in." To cut a long story short, security were called. Then the police were called. I refused to leave. And an hour and a half later, I got into the room. And, you know, she was still just sloped in the thing. And I think if I hadn't gone in there, and this is what I mean about people who were prepared to fight. I was a fighter and I fought for everything I could do. But then other people wouldn't have had that in them at that time. And I carry enough guilt, even though I did fight very hard. So I can only imagine how the families who were more sort of compliant and quieter about it all are feeling now. It is horrendous. And as I say, you feel a bit ridiculous. As a group now, we're very careful who we talk to because you kind of feel a bit embarrassed. You know, for me, it's 5 years down the line. For my dad, I shouldn't be, and I'm a pretty strong person, I shouldn't still be having this gnawing away at me.
Cara told Every Story Matters about feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and feeling suicidal, and is that level of grief and guilt and overwhelm something which your members have told you about?
Absolutely. I'd say there's very few of us who aren't medicated for anxiety, myself included. You know, I think it's better to be open and honest and say that. At the time, during a 6-month period, my mum had 2 strokes, my dad died of COVID, my husband was diagnosed with COVID, and we built an extension. So it was like, no wonder I had lockjaw. And it took me about a year to return to the normal sort of world. And as I say, you kind of, our grief has changed over the years. So we've had sort of periods of, right, fight the good fight. We want a Wales COVID inquiry, right, we're going for it, to, oh, God, what's going on? I've got to walk away from this. I can't handle it anymore.
Exhaustion.
Yeah, it's been gruelling. And the reason we all keep going now is to make sure that our voices are heard and that we do get a bit of accountability.
Thank you. I want to talk about a different topic now, and I know that you have worked as a filmmaker, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. That's my job.
And you tell us about the discovery of filming and photographs of people in hospital settings. How did that first come to your attention?
So, I've got to get through this next section without swearing. This really annoys me. But basically, a week after my dad died, there was a post on, as was Twitter then, from an employee of the health board with a photo of a body bag. Obviously, somebody in the body bag with "bad day at the office" as the tag, and it was the day that my dad had died. Further investigation then, we now discovered that the health board had allowed staff, five members of staff, to take photographs throughout the pandemic. Two members of staff in particular we're aware of the photos that they did. And one in particular released a book, which the first book was absolutely fine. Photos of recovered COVID patients, photos of staff, absolutely fine. The second book that came out was absolutely harrowing.
Photographs of people on the ward.
People
patients.
dead, dying, and in the morgue. Patients. It really is. It's horrific. Patients, prone patients, patients who clearly could not have given consent for their photographs to be taken. And this was in the second book. We then found out that photos such as the body bag was in a gallery for sale for £125, a print of that. Really horrific photographs. We obviously contacted the health board. They said the photographer was doing this in his own time before and after work. We've assigned data control to him. As a filmmaker who's filmed in that very health board, I know all the media policies. I know all that, and it went against every media policy. I know enough about copyright to know that the health board would have had to have signed that copyright over to the photographer, because automatically it would go to them. So as the state we're in at the moment, this photographer has at least 17,000 images on a hard drive of dead, dying people. The health board have said they're not easily identifiable. Well, they are. If we see them and we know what date, they absolutely are. And that's not even the point. The fact of if your parent was in hospital dying or dead and somebody who had access to that hospital, access all areas, felt that they could go up with a camera and point it at a head, an ear, anything of your parent, is just the thought of my dad, me not being able to be there, and some theatre technician being able to go right round the hospital taking photographs of dead and dying patient. It just infuriates me. And the fact that the health board have not put their hands up and said, we will destroy those images, has infuriated me. We've gone to Welsh Government to ask for their help. They will offer none. And I know what will happen in 10 years' time, the anniversary, another book will come out and all these images will be shown, and there's probably my dad in there.
And it's not just you who's been affected by this, is it? Members of your organisation as well have told you of examples of them seeing images which they think maybe their loved one, and even arguments within families as to whether or not a particular image is their loved one or not.
One lady is absolutely convinced it's her husband. You know, if you've got a picture of an ear and a mask like that and somebody like that, if you've been married to somebody for 30 years, you're going to know their ear. The hospital may say that's not easily identifiable, but the fact that they felt they could do that without consent, and the fact that these images are still there, is just...
You also mention about one of your members' loved ones being filmed by a news channel whilst they were being treated with CPAP oxygen, and that person's family seeing them for the first time on a news report.
That's it. And it's just... because we weren't allowed to go there, it fills in all the blanks, if you like. It fills in all the blanks of what their treatment was like, what they looked like, what sort of... And the fact that you're having to fill this in from a member of staff who was going around taking photographs is just... Everybody knows it's horrendous. Everybody knows human rights have been breached here. Everyone knows that their media policy is being breached. Nobody is putting their hands up and saying, we will destroy those photos. And that's what we want. Learn a lesson from it. Learn a lesson from it that is not acceptable, which their own media policy says it's not. But please, please, please destroy those 17,000 images that are currently on a hard drive in somebody's home in Abergavenny. They need to be destroyed. I don't know how we make that happen. Everybody we tell this story to, we've gone to human rights lawyers, we've done everything we can, short of breaking in and destroying it ourselves.
Yes.
But it's just harrowing. I cannot begin to tell you how awful that was, seeing that tweet, "Bad day at the office," and the man in the or the person in a body bag on the day my dad died. I cannot begin to tell you how just that soft hostage situation, the dignity being stripped from them, and that's how it felt. Every time you visited a hospital, it felt as though you were visiting a prison, and that all rights were stripped. That's exactly how it felt.
There are two aspects to what you're saying, Mrs. Smith-Higgins. One is the taking of the photographs at all, or the filming at all. The second is the "bad day at the office" caption. Did the health board do anything about the member of staff who thought it was appropriate to put that kind of...
We never heard. I'm sure things did, because we kicked off a huge stink with the health board, but we never had the things we asked for, which was for all images to be deleted. That never happened. They simply said he is the data controller, not us. And, you know, as I say, they didn't mention copyright. They own the copyright unless they've assigned it. It's all... It's horrendous.
Thank you. I want to turn to burials, religious practices and memorialisation, please. Let's begin this topic, please, by looking again at Every Story Matters and to page 10. And can we highlight the final paragraph, please, on page 10? Friends and family members said they lost the opportunity for gatherings to honour their loved ones and to celebrate their life, even after restrictions had begun to ease. They reflected on the pain they felt because they would never get these opportunities back. For some people from different religious and cultural backgrounds, not being able to conduct their traditional ceremonies left many feeling anxious about their loved one's spiritual journey. Is that something which resonates with information that you've received from your members?
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, funerals are important. There's a reason we have funerals. You know, it always used to fascinate me as a kid. Why do they have a party afterwards? And then you go to one and you realise why you have a wake afterwards. You know, there's a reason for it. And so, yeah, it all ties into not being able to see someone. And as I say, this soft hostage, they're just taken away and then taken away further.
Thank you. And let's move to page 35, please, and look at what one bereaved daughter from Wales told Every Story Matters. Because my parents had pre-arranged funeral plans and they assumed they were going at different times, they'd said, right, we want one hearse and a car to follow. But of course, we just needed 3 cars, 2 hearses and 1 car to follow. So the funeral directors said, we'll refund you the car. They were so caring, and when you're at the most vulnerable, they weren't trying to sort of take advantage. They were trying to sort of help and support. So, but people who had plans, those plans had to be changed because of the circumstances in which they died.
Yeah, I can't add a lot to that because of my dad's bonkers experience that he picked with a direct cremation. But certainly the impact from our families of not having a proper funeral is, you know, cannot be overstated.
Thank you. Let's move to page 36, please, of this record and have a look at Jane's story. Thank you. Jane's husband had cancer and caught COVID-19 during the pandemic. The last time she saw him in person was when he was taken away in an ambulance. She was not able to visit him in the hospice where he died. My memory is an image, and it's the look on my husband's face as he was taken away in an ambulance, because I think he knew by the look on my face it was probably the last time we'd see each other. Jane spoke about the difficulties she faced trying to organise her husband's funeral because many more funerals than usual were taking place. We struggled to actually get a vicar because they were so busy, so we struggled to get the vicar we actually wanted for his service, which I ended up doing by more like pleading and bribing. The lack of choice around what could happen during the funeral added to her grief and sadness. There was no singing. My husband loved singing in church and everything like that, but none of us were allowed to sing. We had to listen to music. The restrictions on the number of people who could attend funerals meant that some family members were not able to come. My family, I don't live anywhere near my family. They were scattered from, Yorkshire down to Plymouth. So none of those could come to the funeral because we were so restricted on numbers. Changing restrictions also meant that she had to struggle to find flowers for the funeral at the last minute. The day before the funeral, we were not allowed flowers, and then the day of the funeral, they said we could get flowers. So I scrabbled all morning of the funeral trying to get some flowers organised for my husband's funeral. The lack of singing allowed, and the fact that there had to be a choice often of which family members were allowed to attend. Are those both details that resonate with you from stories that you've heard from your members?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous looking back on it now. It's just absolutely mind blown. As I say, we've just focused on changing people's behaviours rather than changing the environment that these events happen in. And I think the emphasis was just totally wrong. Just totally wrong. And the impact of just focusing on changing people's behaviours will carry on forever, for our lifetimes anyway. There could have been things done to change the environment that these funerals were happening in and to make them as normal as possible. It's just, looking back, ridiculous.
The inquiry heard yesterday from Dr. Sam Royston from the Commission on Bereavement, and he told the inquiry how important memorialisation is for people. You tell us at paragraph 42 of your statement that the COVID-19 pandemic was a mass tragedy causing more than 13,000 deaths in Wales, a tsunami of grief, and it requires a healing process. And you tell us about the efforts that your organisation have made in order to try and ensure that there is appropriate memorialisation of those who died during the pandemic. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, well, it's been a bit flat in Wales. We haven't had much at all. We have two woodlands now, which the government sorted out. There's mixed feelings on it. I quite like the one woodland that I've been to, but
so that's one in North Wales
and one in South Wales.
One in South Wales.
Yeah, there's supposed to be one in West Wales as well, but we haven't heard anything about that. But the one in South Wales, I quite like. It's quite a nice place. Not easily accessible, but it's quite a nice place. But throughout this process, the government started trying to buy land off farmers to make in our name. And the farmers were like, well, come on, you've been after this land for ages. Now you just... And so we backed the NFU then and went with them and said, don't be buying stuff, forcing stuff for us to have a woodland. We don't even want a woodland, to be honest. What we want as a group is a big old memorial outside the Senedd. And not as a political sort of thing, but as a reminder to everybody who serves in there that their decisions that they make have an impact on people. There's already a memorial outside there for the seamen in the World War I, and that's what we want as a group, and that's what we'll be working towards. Because no, there has been nothing. Our government hasn't even tweeted about COVID Memorial Day Scottish Government do. We're so jealous of the Scottish families and the relationship they have. But, you know, we know what we want now. We wanted a nice big memorial outside the Senedd, not political, there as something that we can flock to on National Day of Reflection and any other day.
Thank you. Bringing that together with other suggestions that you make in your witness statement about designing restrictions and guidelines for a future civil emergency that touch upon ceremonies and funerals and what needs to be taken into consideration. Let's please look at Every Story Matters and turn to page 13 at the bottom and highlight the paragraph that goes on to the next page. Thank you. Many contributors would also like to see a greater focus on care and compassion when designing restrictions and guidelines around funerals, burials and end-of-life ceremonies. They felt restrictions should be more compassionate, allowing larger numbers of families and friends to attend so people do not feel so alone. And when looking to the future, contributors also highlighted the importance of remembrance and commemoration for their loved ones. Our loved ones didn't have dignity in death, so we must make sure that they have dignity now in remembering. We need to look at ways in which it can be remembered, you know, in a beautiful way for us, for them, and make sure they're not forgotten and what they went through. Does that reflect what you've just told me?
Yeah, absolutely. The impact of not having funerals in a normal way is just... as I say, it just lives with you. They're there for a reason. And when you take that away, there's an obvious impact. The same as with visiting hospitals. Until you can get the environment right in a hospital, I think it's ridiculous to expect people to change their behaviours. You know, looking back now, with ventilation and with proper masks, we could have visited and there would have been no problem. Same with funerals. So for us as a group, our position is no. You know, there should be no sort of restrictions on funerals, and there shouldn't really be restrictions on visiting in hospitals or care homes either, because the impact on everybody is ridiculous, and the impact is there because money's not being spent. Money's not being spent on making those environments safe places to be. You know, why is a hospital no longer the sterile, healthy, hygienic place we expect it to be? Why is it in Wales, over 120 people catch COVID on a hospital ward in Wales every week? That is a ridiculous figure. Every week. And, you know, there's only 3 million people in Wales. There's 9 million in London. Wales is not a massive place. And that's over 100 people every week catching COVID in hospital. Now, this is last week's figures. So forget behaviour changes. Forget, oh, you're not visiting. No, sort out your own environment. Sort out your hospitals. Get them to be clean places where patients can go in and feel safe. And I heard clinically vulnerable families saying the same thing. Well, it's not just clinically vulnerable families. It's everybody has that right to be in a safe place with clean air in a hospital or a care home. And the same for funerals. Everybody has that right. And I don't think if another pandemic comes, when another pandemic comes, people will so quickly adhere to these restrictions. I know I certainly wouldn't, because I'm annoyed now. I'm annoyed that actually I wasn't allowed to visit my dad, and he was in the most unhealthy place with the dirtiest air in Wales, and I wasn't allowed to visit him. Why? It's ridiculous. So, you know, for me, it's no, sort out your own homes, and then we'll all change our behaviour. But until then, no. And I really hope that somebody sues a couple of these health boards, because unless Legal and Risk get on it and start saying, hey, come on, we need to sort this out now because we're getting sued over this, nothing will happen unless you can make a recommendation and get them to change the law. But honestly, clean air, we've got it. You know, I came to London, I haven't been to London for a while. The air is cleaner in the city outdoors. I don't know what it's like in your hospitals here in London, but in Wales it's absolutely bogging. We got old hospitals, stuffy, no ventilation, no HEPA filters, no nothing. And it's wrong. We've got to get that regulated and we've got to get it into law.
I'm not going to give you legal advice, but you can get that from your daughter. But, to sue, I wouldn't hold your breath because you're going to have to prove a causative link.
I know.
3 remaining topics, please.
But can I come back?
Yeah,
but we could have the air monitored so that there's a quality, the same way I used to work in an old office in London, and come the winter we'd be watching that temperature to see if we could go home, and come the summer we'd be watching it to see if we could get out. There was regulations over that. There is nothing with the air on a hospital ward.
Oh yeah, I totally accept that's a different point. It's a point that Mr. Wagner's been making to me ever since I started this inquiry.
Fabulous.
So I understand that point.
Thank you. I was just about to move on and to say that there are 3 remaining topics. Bereavement support, bereavement administration and the complaints process. You've told us about your own experience of bereavement support and counselling. Have you heard from your members that some of them experienced a total absence of bereavement support?
Absolutely every single one of our families. Nothing. And even to this day, I'm pretty sure that we've all got elements of PTSD. There's things that we've seen and done and that we still need that help even now, 5 years on, 6 years on. But nothing. There is nobody in our group who has given a positive or received any sort of help other than medication.
And have they also told you of difficulties that they experienced in relation to administration after death, closing down bank accounts for their loved ones and having to go through the traumatic experience of dealing with all of that administration whilst feeling incredibly grief-stricken? Yeah.
The system where you can sign up once is very good. And
we heard about yesterday.
Yeah,
yes.
and I heard that yesterday, and then, about expanding that. But to be honest, the biggest barrier that we've had is in communication within the health board or with a care home, trying to get access to notes, trying to get any sense of, I'm still waiting for a response 5 years on.
So that brings me on to the final topic, which is the complaints process.
Yeah.
Is your experience of a lack of response to requests for information something that's also been reflected in what you've heard from other members?
Absolutely. 100%. I can speak for other members completely on this, that the frustration we have, and actually what we're trying to do is run our own little cheap sort of inquest. That's what we're trying to do. There should have been inquests for where there was a care home, big cluster of deaths, and the same with the health board. There should have been, and it's really difficult to sort of rationalise that actually our relatives were in this soft hostage situation. It felt like a prison where you couldn't visit. But had they been prisoners and caught COVID and died, they would have had an inquest.
Because
they were
who die in those circumstances in prison
would have had an inquest. Whereas my dad, on a hospital ward, 30 people caught COVID. If one of them was then sadly a nurse, she's the only one who would have had an inquest. And this just seems fundamentally unfair, that your rights are somehow diminished by where you are. If you catch something nosocomially, whether it's in a prison or a hospital, they're still public buildings. Well, prison isn't really a public building, but you know what I mean. They're still government sort of buildings, and it just feels incredibly wrong that, especially with cluster outbreaks, where we've got a care home in West Wales where there was 52 residents and 26 of them died within a 2-week period. Now, if that were to happen this week, the police would be all over it. There would be something tragically wrong. But at the time, it's just written off as, oh, it's COVID. Well, that's a heck of a lot. And, you know, health boards, we know from speaking to our families that there's a specific ward within a specific hospital where we've got a number of families who caught COVID and died. Now, is there a specific problem with that? We'll never know. We'll never know because there were no inquests done.
And the lack of an inquest means that questions remain unanswered.
Exactly.
In terms of the circumstances in which a loved one has died.
Exactly. You kind of feel guilty for feeling like this because if you lose somebody unexpectedly, you know, it's not a competition of grief. If I was to lose somebody in a car accident, it's not a sort of comparison of grief, but at least you would have some answers. Whereas this way, you've sent somebody into hospital, they've caught COVID, they've died, they've gone, boom, that's the end of it. And we've had, you know, I call it a Primark version of an inquest with the nosocomial inquiry, which Welsh Government did. And it was appalling. We haven't got one single member of our group who found any benefit in that. The results were, the report that we had back were infactual, sometimes incorrect. Mine referred to my dad as Mrs. throughout. It's the lack of an inquest. And I understand that, you know, you can't have inquests, although having looked at the number of inquests that they hold every year, they didn't go up particularly. I was surprised how few there were, actually, 200,000 a year. It's not that many, is it? They could have probably done inquests on people. They would only have to have doubled their output.
I think that the inquiry has heard evidence from the Chief Coroner that because of the COVID restrictions within which the coronial service and its members were working, it was extremely difficult to...
But then again, that's talking about the buildings, isn't it? It's talking about the buildings that are inappropriate to carry on these sort of...
The buildings and members of the service who themselves were either suffering from COVID or were having to isolate, that the system was not capable of dealing with as many inquests as it would have been normally had the system not changed, and how the government brought in changes to relax the circumstances in which inquests needed to be held so that the system didn't go under with or be overwhelmed by the numbers.
And I think that was an oversight. I think that was wrong. Having read the coroner's the report that they did, all they were saying basically was we're underfunded, as we are, which, yeah, I get it, and we need more money. But actually, I'd have been giving them a bigger thumbs up if they'd said, and actually there was a lot of these cases that we should have been having inquests for, because, you know, this poor chap who I met this morning, his wife died at home of COVID. No post-mortem, no autopsy, no inquest. Just because she tested positive 5 days before for COVID, she was just put down COVID, that's it. Well, who knows?
But it wasn't just the lack of inquests which you've described that had an effect on people's inability to have their questions answered. It was also, which you have described from your own experience, that the lack of response from organisations from whom you're seeking answers or documentation in order to help you find the answers.
Yeah, sorry. So how I got into inquest was by saying that's basically what we're fundamentally trying to do ourselves.
Yes.
and trying to get answers, you know, and we're very lucky now. Brian and Deirdre, our legal counsel, are helping, just simply writing a letter to a health board saying, you've had 5 years now to provide this response. Please, will you help our client? Is really helpful.
And it's not just you, is it?
It's everyone. It's all of us.
You
all
tell
of
us at paragraph 26, many members have had to engage in complex and lengthy complaints procedures following the deaths of their loved ones. Complaints went unanswered or were massively delayed. And when responses did come, they were incomplete, inconsistent and inaccurate.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they actually, on the report that they sent me from the nosocomial report, they completely changed the cause of death. My dad had 3 things on his cause of death, which was COVID, heart and prostate cancer. They then came back and said, no, it's a blood infection. And I was like, well, he's had a blood infection for 9 years and he's stable. He just takes, it's fine. And they said, no, that's what it is. We're sure of it. 26 people had looked at his notes, looked at him in the 48 hours before he died. 26 people had written down that he was being treated for COVID pneumonia. I asked the health board if I contacted the coroner myself. I said, can they do this? Can they just say that? And they said, well, they'd have to contact us to change the cause of death, and they haven't done that. It's like that's an added sort of, you know, it just adds to the grief all the time, the impact of it, to just not have any answers, and then just to be lied to as well, you know, is just wrong. It's wrong.
Well, I'd like to conclude my questioning where I began, really, and to go back to the organisation that you represent, because I know that you and other members of the group feel that you've been a lone voice, really, as a non-government organisation. Do you feel that the aims and ambitions that you set out to achieve when the group was formed back in July of 2021 have been realised?
Well, we didn't get a Wales COVID inquiry, but we might be getting one this summer. So for us, it's been, you know, we started off with 5 angry daughters running this. There's now 2 angry daughters co-leading it. And yeah, it's grueling, you know, it really is. I never thought I would still be here at this point on. It's always the flakiest, loudest, and, you know, the who keeps going. But trust me, it's grueling. And, you know, reading the inquiry has obviously helped with all the information that we've got to read and what have you. But yeah, it's grueling. You know, I think I had to read 6 documents for this today. I think I managed to get through 3 because you start reading them and you are just taken back there. But we have to keep going because actually nothing has changed in Wales yet. Nothing. So I say, while there's still 79% of people in inpatients in Welsh hospitals caught it there. You know, that's wrong. I think it was 120 last week. And this is, until that changes, we have to keep going.
Miss Smith-Higgins, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Talking of keeping going, I think you were with me at the very first meeting I had.
I was. I've got a few more grey hairs and a few more brow lines now.
Well, I'm not going to admit to any of those. But anyway, thank you. It's really appropriate that you should be here in the last week of evidence. I can see where your daughter got her aptitude for advocacy from. You've been extraordinarily helpful. I'm a bit concerned you haven't shown the signs of your grief. And I know, well, I'm not a professional psychologist, but you're going to probably have a reaction. So have you got someone with you? I know you've got Mr. Stanton. I know he'll look after you extremely well.
I carry it all in my shoulders, so I've got the chiropractor booked for Friday. I'll be okay.
Make sure that you are
Thank you.
closeted when you leave the hearing room. So
Thank you very
much for your help. And I'm sorry your daughter didn't specialise in medical negligence. She might have been able to help you.
That'll stick with you, that story. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take a break now and I shall return at have a little longer, past.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jackson.
My lady, the next witness is Julie Thomas.
If you could repeat after me, please. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
to be the truth,
to be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, please.
Hope it hasn't been too awful waiting.
No, it's been fine.
Now, you are Julie Thomas, is that right?
I am, yes.
And you've already told me you'd rather me call you Julie rather than Miss Thomas in your evidence.
Yes, please.
I'm really sorry, but do you
That's
mind
okay,
if we call
no,
you
no.
by your surname?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Miss Thomas, you've provided a witness statement to Module 10 of the inquiry. Reference number is INQ 000660031. And you have that witness statement before you.
I do, yeah.
And you've signed that witness statement.
I have.
And you're able to confirm that its contents are true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
Absolutely.
And Miss Thomas, the statement that you've provided is to explain the circumstances around the passing of your husband, Hugh Thomas, aged 61 on the 29th of December 2020, after being infected with COVID-19. And your statement discusses, doesn't it, your experiences around his passing and the difficulties that your family have had with the process of bereavement.
That's correct.
And it was following the various difficulties that you had after your husband's death that you found and became a member of COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice Cymru, who were able to discuss bereavement services with you.
That's right.
And I just want to start by asking Miss Thomas about your husband and when he became infected with COVID-19. Firstly, you say that he was a physically fit man.
He was very fit.
And it was on the 12th of December 2020 that you were in Pembrokeshire. That's where your family lived
That's
at
right,
the time.
yes.
And he called you from Swansea to say that he was unwell.
Yes.
And the following day you were both in Pembrokeshire. His health hadn't improved, so 3 days later, on the 16th of December, you both went to get tested.
That's right, yes. In Haverfordwest, yes, we did.
And your results came back 2 days later, on the 18th of December. You were positive for COVID-19, and his results were inconclusive,
That's correct.
but it was his condition that was worsening.
Much worse than me, yeah.
And so you called 111, and you were told to take him into hospital.
That's right, yeah.
So you did that? You drove to the
Yes, I
hospital
drove
car
him.
park?
I drove him to the hospital car park where they knew we were going to arrive, and they were waiting for my husband.
And when you
Alright.
say they,
I'm presuming it was a porter and a nurse. I'm not sure really, but yeah, they had a wheelchair.
and so what did they do with him?
My husband was helped to the wheelchair, and he was wheeled into the hospital, and that I couldn't go with him. I had to stay in the car park. I mean, I accepted that because I was positive with COVID myself. So, you know, I accepted their decision there.
And did you manage to speak to him before he left?
My husband was very breathless, so it was just a case of him raising his hand and he was wheeled off.
He was taken into hospital.
He was taken into the, you know, we were met in the car park. They had like a porter cabin in the car park for people. So we were met at the porter cabin, and then he was wheeled across through the double doors into the hospital.
And then you went home.
I drove back home then.
So we'll move on now to your initial experiences whilst he was at hospital. What was the extent of your contact with him?
he had his mobile phone with him, and he was communicating with me via the mobile phone for the first 3 days he was in hospital. He was in a CPAP mask for 72 hours, and obviously it was taken off for him to be able to have food or whatever. But I would ring the hospital morning and evening, because at the time you saw on the media that the hospitals were overrun. I mean, I work for the NHS. I know how busy it is in a hospital. I didn't want to be that nuisance to them. So I used to ring every morning and every evening for an update on my husband to where he was. But I had communication with him personally via his mobile phone.
And it was in the early hours of the 21st of December that he had told you
Yes,
that his doctor was considering ventilating him
that's correct.
to rest his organs. But you say that he didn't actually want to be ventilated.
No. In fact, my husband, being my husband, he was quite a vibrant personality. He wrote a piece on his Facebook group to his friends, warning people that basically to be careful, you know, to be aware of COVID, to wash your shopping when you go shopping, etc. Just warning people that it could happen to anyone. And he put a piece on that about ventilation and how he'd avoided being ventilated up to that point. And it's all there for our friends and family to read. And at that point, I think we both felt that he himself felt, and I felt, that he had turned a corner, perhaps, and was going to get he was going to get better. That's what we felt at that point. I think that was the 20th of December he wrote that. And then, of course, things changed on the 21st of December.
And you, in fact, reposted that Facebook post.
I did.
Praising the staff who you said were working flat out.
I did, yeah.
And adding further warnings to his post.
Yes.
But the contact about the possible ventilation was coming from
From
who?
my husband.
Not the hospital.
Yeah, from my husband, yeah.
And that was on the 21st of December. When did you next hear from him?
I heard in the early hours of the morning, on the 21st, he texted me and said, Jill, there are people coming into the ward now. I'm probably going to have to stop texting. And then it all went quiet. So I was aware what had happened. And then at 8 o'clock the following morning, which would be the 22nd of December, I had a call from the ward informing me that Hugh had indeed been ventilated. And that was the first time the ward had ever actually rung me. I'd always had to ring them, you know. They'd never contacted me before directly.
And how were they with you on that call?
Straight to the point that he'd been ventilated to rest his organs. And I truly believe that was the case. I didn't know at that point enough about the ventilation process. I should have been told about the ventilation process. I believe before anybody is ventilated, the next of kin should be informed about ventilation. I mean, I'm not medically trained. I feel that I should have been told what it entailed, how they were going to do, you know, the whole process, really.
You kept calling the hospital twice a day for
Twice
updates
a day, yeah.
On his condition.
Yes,
And that was through Christmas, through Boxing Day.
yes.
And you were told that you couldn't visit him in hospital for Christmas.
No.
Were you still COVID positive at that time?
I was COVID positive on the 16th. I didn't have another test. I just presumed that, you know, after 7 to 10 days, I felt okay. I wasn't like my husband I was okay, I was functioning.
How did it make you feel that you couldn't go in
I
on
was devastated,
Christmas?
absolutely devastated.
And your family?
The same, we were all devastated.
When were you first allowed to visit Hugh?
I had a phone call from them on December the 28th, around the tea time mark, to say that they had agreed that I could go in to see Hugh for 10 minutes that evening. They gave me a time to go down to the hospital. My younger son was living with me in Pembrokeshire, so we both went to the hospital together. My elder son lived in Swansea, so I rang him, obviously, as soon as I got the phone call. There were COVID restrictions were in, but we were at the point that he was driving to Swansea and he had a legitimate reason, if he had been stopped, to come to the hospital to see his father. So when we got to the car park, the three of us met up, but only my younger son and I were allowed to go into the hospital, onto the ward where we were gowned up. My elder son was turned away at the ward entrance.
Do you know
What-
why?
Yes, they said that there was only two of us allowed to
Oh,
go
I
in.
see.
And basically they said that my son was devastated, my eldest son, and he begged, and they said, yes, you can come back at 10 o'clock. This was at 7 o'clock. So he went back to his car in the car park and waited until he was able to go in at 10 o'clock.
And this was the 28th of December.
This was the 28th of December, yes.
So you'd not seen your husband for 10 days?
No.
And you went into the hospital with your youngest?
Yes.
And what happened just before you went to see your husband?
Well, as we walked through it was a high dependency unit door. There were probably about 6 or 7 beds with people ventilated in there. I'd never been in a high dependency unit before. All I had eyes for was my husband, obviously. And I could see him as I walked through the door, but we were stopped as we walked into the ward by 2 people in full cover. You know, they were the PPE. They even had oxygen cylinders on their back, and they were in. It was quite shocking, actually. And they stopped us, and they said that a DNR had been applied to my husband, and that he wasn't well. He was gravely ill, but they were going to keep fighting for him, and that they were going to do a kidney function test after we had stayed with him for the 10 minutes. So even at that point, I still felt that, once they sort his kidneys out, you know, we'll have crossed another bridge, basically. I didn't think for one moment that was going to be the last time I ever saw my husband alive.
So you hadn't realised that at the time,
Not for one moment.
and that meant presumably that you didn't know that was your chance to say goodbye to him?
No.
And you weren't able to see him together as a family?
No.
And how long did you
It was
have with him?
exactly 10 minutes. I was able to stand by his bed. We weren't offered seats. We were standing next to him. I held his hand. My son held his hand, his other hand. And it was horrendous.
And then you, after 10 minutes left,
After 10 minutes, we were asked to leave.
your eldest son went up and
No, he was 3 hours later. We
was
went back down to the car park, and my eldest son was still in the car park, and he was allowed to go up 3 hours later. I presumed at the time the 3-hour gap was because they were doing the kidney function tests on my husband. I was never really told why, and neither was my son. He just waited and went in to see his dad at 10 o'clock, and he was there for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes with his dad.
And we'll hear more about his experiences of bereavement towards the end of your evidence.
Yes.
You were then told in the early hours of the morning on the 29th of December that your husband was failing and likely to pass away.
That's right.
You were at home, your sons were at their respective homes,
My younger son was living with me,
and your
and
other
my
son
other
was in
son had gone
Swansea.
back to Swansea.
So that left your husband alone at hospital. Did you expect to be given the opportunity to say goodbye to him?
Yes, Yes, I did. I thought that, yes, you know, we were in shock. I didn't expect to have that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was 6 hours after I'd been with him. I just felt that they must have known at 10 o'clock when my elder son was with him that he was as gravely ill as he was, because within 4 hours of my elder son leaving, my husband had passed away. I just felt that maybe a bit of empathy could have been given to us as a family, and we could have been with him for those last 4 hours. That was never an option. You know, that was never portrayed to us. We were never allowed that option.
And you were called very soon after that initial call
10 minutes.
to be told that your husband had passed away.
Yes,
And you later learnt that his ventilator had been switched off, but you
I
weren't
did.
told this at the time.
no, I didn't know that until I'd sent for his medical records, and reading his medical records, it was then that we were aware that his ventilator had been changed from mechanical to manual, and that he had, in actual fact, been switched off.
You were told that you could come and collect the property.
I was.
You say in your statement that your youngest, Alex, went and he was told not to open the bag of items for 72
To
hours.
put them in the boot of our car and leave them there for 72 hours, which was a bit daunting, to say the least. You know, we did as we were told. We left them in the boot of the car, and after 72 hours, probably to the dot, we took them out and opened them up. Yeah, awful period.
And what did you do with his items?
His clothing, I was so concerned, I burned his clothing. His mobile phone, etc., was dead at that point. We clinically wiped them all down, as everybody was doing, I suppose, with everything. And I turned his mobile phone on, and that's when I had a photograph. He'd taken a photograph. This is my husband. He'd taken a photograph of himself in his mask for me, and it was only after he'd passed away and I put his mobile phone on that the photograph popped up on my phone. Bit ironic, really, but if you'd known who, that was typical.
His funeral then was on the 9th of January, and
7th, I think it was.
On the
was it?
7th.
7th on.
we'll hear more in one of your son's accounts of how that funeral went in terms of the practices and
Yeah.
rituals that were disrupted. But there were various things that you weren't able to do.
Yes, they were.
And how did that leave you feeling about the funeral?
To be honest, I think I went through the funeral myself, still in shock. You are. Afterwards, on reflection, I realised how cold it was, how empty it was, total lack of any empathy from anybody, really. It was just dreadful. There was no rite of passage for my husband. Nothing was done as he would have wanted, as I would have wanted, as my sons deserved. You know, every funeral has a wake. It's where you sit, and you know, my sons missed out on hearing about their dad in his younger days from his friends, and in actual fact, I met somebody in the summer last year who said to me, you know, give me his condolences 5 years after my husband had passed. And my son said, oh, I'd love to have spoken to him about Dad in his rugby days, or Dad here. And they, as two sons, never got that. They never got that closure or that side of their father that they never knew. You know, they knew Dad as Dad, but if they'd gone to a wake, they'd have heard about Dad as a single man growing up, you know, the rugby playing Dad. They never got that.
Now, you've mentioned already that you obtained your husband's medical records months later, but it's right, you weren't able to actually look at them
I
for
couldn't open them,
years.
no. They came, yeah.
Does that mean that you weren't able to
I
properly
wasn't
start
in
grieving?
the right state of mind to open. I couldn't actually open the plastic packaging of them. It was a big, thick package, and I thought, what am I going to read in here now? Do I really want to? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. There was this doubt in me, even then, that perhaps there were things in those records that I didn't want to know, but I had to build myself up to do it, basically. And I did eventually open them, and by opening them, that's when it really hit.
I'm just going to list off some of the things that you detail in your statement about what you found in the notes, which you say seemed inconsistent with what you'd been told by hospital staff. So firstly, that when your husband was first ventilated, you asked staff if he could hear you, and you were told that he couldn't. But then the note said that he was lightly sedated, so you suppose that he might have been able to hear you.
Yes, he was lightly sedated, and it actually said in the notes that he had physically tried to remove the pipe himself from his throat, which would be typically be my husband. He would have been fighting. He wouldn't have liked that. So being lightly sedated, if he was capable of doing that, I truly believe he would have been able to know we were next to his bed.
There was an entry from the date of the ventilation which suggested that you'd been updated of the plan to ventilate him, but in fact you never were updated.
No, I wasn't.
There was the do not resuscitate notice appeared to have been applied for retrospectively.
There was a lot of retrospective writing in the notes. Lots of things were retrospectively put in.
And you say your recognition of that comes from your work in the National Health Service?
Yes, yeah.
You managed to secure a meeting with staff at the hospital eventually in July 2024. That was only after some outside help.
Yes, I had to engage an advocate to help me because I was being put off by the hospital complaint service. They sent me a very generic letter saying that as it was 12 months after my husband had passed, they couldn't meet with me. Basically, I'd left it too late. Yet, when you read down on the generic letter, it said in mitigating circumstances you could push for it, so I did. And in the end, I had to engage an advocate, an independent person who also spoke to the hospital on my behalf. And after much to-ing and fro-ing, eventually I did get my meeting with the health board.
And you acknowledge in your statement that you know this isn't a forum for determining concerns about your
Absolutely not,
husband's
yeah.
treatment or the delivery of his care.
No, I understand that.
But it might well be important and faithful to the detail of your statement and your experience for me to just list those
Yes, absolutely.
for you.
Yeah.
You were angry at the ventilator being switched off before he died and not being told about that. You felt it was too soon, particularly given your husband was always very fit. There's some record of his heart rhythm showing abnormalities, but no action being taken. When it came to the notice, you didn't understand the basis for this, given the prior good health and his relative good age, young age. This goes with a pattern that you'd identified from the notes, that there were decisions being made on his behalf, or at least without your...
Absolutely. There was no communication with me at all. I felt that he was just another... This sounds a bit corny, but I just felt that he was like another number on a hospital bed. They didn't know the person that he was, and they give me the impression, looking back, they didn't want to know. Maybe they didn't have enough time, maybe they were busy, but they didn't know who he was, how fit he was. They knew none of that, and nobody asked. And probably if I'd been able to go into the hospital, I would have been able to relay these points to whoever was in charge, to a doctor, but that was never an opportunity open to me.
So it's the lack of communication or
Absolutely,
explanation?
100%, yeah. No communication, really. It was dire.
And that's prolonged then any answers
Yes,
being obtained for you.
yes.
And how has that affected your grieving process?
I would say for the first 3 years after he passed, I spent 3 years, I felt as if spent the 3 years fighting to be noticed, to be communicated with. So as a mother, you put your children first. I put my boys first. I want them to make sure they were okay. So yes, I probably prolonged my own grieving process until I actually went to the hospital and met with the hospital board. I wouldn't allow myself to go down that route of grieving, I suppose. I suppose that's the correct way of putting it.
Now, you've appended to the end of your statement some accounts given by your sons, Alex
That's right, yes.
and Oliver Thomas, and I'll just read those.
Yes, yeah.
Firstly, your youngest, Alex Thomas. As a family, we've had concerns about the level of care my father received. The hospital has provided next to no bereavement support, and what was offered was subpar at best. The day after my father passed away, I went to the hospital to collect his belongings. I was met by an ICU nurse holding my father's items in a sealed bag. There was no mention of condolences, just the advice that I was not to open the bag for 72 hours. This is just one example of the lack of aftercare we received as a family. It's caused my mother and I great distress that it was stated in the notes that we, as a family, turned down the chance to be with my father when he passed away. It's haunted us that my father had to die alone, let alone have the medical records state that we had the option to be there with him when this is simply not true. How is it appropriate that when we reached out a few years later, simply asking for some professional advice to clarify some of the notes, staff advised too much time had passed to receive support? This is when alarm bells began to ring with regards to the care provided. I'm hoping my father's death will not be in vain. I'm praying that this pandemic does not get swept under the rug. And I hope these answers prevent additional trauma being caused in future pandemics. And then from your eldest, Oliver Thomas. Oliver says, on the evening my father passed away, I took a phone call from my mother at around 5 p.m. to say that the hospital had invited her down to visit my father for 10 minutes. I was living in Swansea. I drove to the hospital, which was 1 hour away, and met my mother and younger brother in the car park of the mostly deserted hospital between 6:30 and 7 o'clock. They went to see my father at 7. I was turned away, as only 2 were allowed at a time. I practically had to beg to be allowed to see my father, and was told to return at 10 p.m, and that I could see him then for a brief time. I waited on my own in the car park until 10 p.m, when I was gowned and masked up to enter the unit. I spent between 10 and 15 minutes with my father. I was told he was gravely unwell and asked to leave, but wasn't made aware that this was my time to say goodbye. Even at this point, I thought he would pull through. I drove back to Swansea that evening as lockdown rules meant that I could not visit my mother's house in Pembrokeshire, and my father passed away in the early hours of the 29th of December. The funeral was held on the 7th of January 2021. I was not allowed to accompany my mother and brother in the funeral car. I had to meet them at the crematorium, having driven there alone on the day. Inside, the seats were separated, and we could not sit together due to the guidelines. We for once ignored the rules and pulled our seats together. There were only 10 people allowed at the funeral, plus the vicar and funeral directors. No hymns allowed, no singing. My brother and I were told we had to wear masks to give our eulogies. The service was being recorded for people to watch from their homes, but nobody could hear our eulogies as we were muffled behind the masks. We did not know the vicar. He had no idea who we were or my father was, other than what my mother had written about my father. He spoke and prayed within the crematorium without a mask. We were rushed out of the crematorium halfway through the last song, Midnight Train to Georgia, my father's favourite. The service was around 15 minutes long, and we were told that we could not put roses on my father's coffin, as is customary. There was no wake due to the guidelines, and I travelled back to Swansea, straight from the funeral, alone. The funeral was cold, empty, and inhumane, and the treatment of my family and I was terrible. Now, Ms Thomas, I understand that you've brought with you a further small passage that you would like to read for the inquiry. Is that right?
Yes, if that's okay. The impact of COVID on those left to grieve, the loss of their loved ones, is significant. It has devastated so many families. Many of those who have survived are suffering with long COVID and likely to continue to suffer for the rest of their lives. The strain on people's mental health has been huge. For every COVID death, it is estimated that up to 9 more people are affected by the bereavement. From the shock of the sudden, unexpected death of a loved one, accepting the reality of their death, the inability to say a proper goodbye or be with them, be with a loved one is painful and traumatic. Worries about the care their loved one received before they died, this can lead to feelings of anger, guilt, and a prolonged bereavement. The fact you feel that you could not protect them when they needed you most, the chronic isolation of losing someone during lockdown, the inability of friends and family to support you, the bereaved during this, the hardest time of your life, is so impactful in itself. Funeral restrictions, that feeling of being unable to give your loved ones the send-off they so deserved. Bereavement care was scarce during COVID. I would like to think this has already improved and will continue to improve via education, resources and skills, along with adequate funding of primary care services in the future. I personally have reached the acceptance stage of my husband's death. He passed away over 5 years ago now, and due to the lack of bereavement care offered, I have suffered from an unhealthy grief. My mind was preoccupied by thoughts of his death, my lack of presence at this time at the hospital for him, the lack of empathy from the health authority during this time in the hospital, his passing, the lack of response from the health authority regarding his care. But I'm not alone. I'm not the only one this has happened to. Thousands and thousands of people who lost loved ones to COVID are suffering in different ways. The impact of COVID-19 is felt everywhere. And my hope is that this inquiry will lead to a better handling of any future pandemics, and that those responsible for the bad decisions during the pandemic are made accountable at last. I want to thank you for listening to my personal account, and thank everybody here for listening and giving me respect in my account in general.
Well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms Thomas. And my lady, those are my questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
indeed, Mr. Thomas. I don't know how tough it must have been for you. I can't imagine how tough it must have been for you, but I'm extremely grateful to you. I'm sure your sons are very proud of you.
Yes, yeah, and thank you for listening.
Not at all.
Thank you.
It's very important that I do. And I do hope that gradually your grief and the grief of your sons will gradually ease.
Yes.
We never get better totally, but
No,
ease.
I'm hoping, yes. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Mr. Stanton, is it all right if we carry on with the next summary witness? Thank you.
Who's swearing on the Bible? I don't know. Whatever Santiest. Anything. Peace be.
My lady, the next witness is Teresa O'Hanlon. May she be sworn, please?
You can repeat after me, please. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the
the
truth,
whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the
and
truth.
nothing but the truth.
Thank you, please sit down.
I'm sorry you've had to wait.
That's okay.
Will you give us your full name, please?
Yeah, Teresa Ann O'Hanlon.
Thank you very much, Ms O'Hanlon. You're going to give evidence to the inquiry today about your mother, Patricia O'Hanlon, and your experience of her being taken into hospital and her passing away, and your bereavement following that.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother died in hospital on the 16th of February of 2021 from a COVID-19 infection acquired by her following her admission into hospital on the 23rd of January of 2021. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And at her time of death, she was 71 years old.
Yeah.
You tell us that she had been in reasonable health in the few years prior to the pandemic.
Yes.
She had lost her own mother in 2018, and she had also lost her pet dog Scruffy the following year in 2019.
Yeah, and she treated Scruffy like a human being, like one of her children.
I know that feeling.
And both of those events had hit her hard, really.
Yeah.
And had led to her slowing down.
Yes.
For example, before those two events, you and your mum would go shopping together often
Yes.
and take Scruffy with you, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But after that, she wanted to stay at home much more.
Yeah. She used to love our shopping trips because I'd hide behind boxes and jump out on her and make it fun, like a fun day out.
She lived with pain from rheumatoid arthritis, didn't she?
Yes.
And she had suffered a number of falls and broken some bones in the years leading up to COVID.
Yeah.
But you lived very close to her, and
Yes.
you had a lot of contact with her on a daily basis, and you'd see her many, many times
Yes.
during the course of a week. When the pandemic hit, was there a further deterioration in your mum's health and well-being?
Yeah, she felt isolated because obviously because of her issues, she had a letter stating that she had to shield.
Because she was
Because
clinically vulnerable.
Yeah, clinically vulnerable. So I couldn't go down and visit and stuff like that. But I'd be on the phone to her 6-7 times a day to try and keep her entertained. And so she knew somebody was there.
Yes.
But-
And you would do her shopping for her,
Yeah.
wouldn't you, and drop that off?
Yes.
But there was no deterioration in her cognitive function.
No, nothing at all.
Although you tell us that she suffered from low mood during the pandemic because she was on
Yeah.
her own.
Yeah.
After the first wave, did her well-being begin to improve, although she continued to be in physical pain from her underlying health conditions?
Yeah, as soon as we were allowed to get together in a bubble, and so she was part of my little bubble, as you want to call it. She seemed a lot more cheerful and happier. She was getting to her old self again.
Right. But then in the approach to Christmas, there seemed to be another downturn, and she didn't come to your house for Christmas dinner, did she?
No, because they said that there was going to be another fire break and COVID was rife again. And I think she just got fed up of the not knowing when she'd be allowed to see her daughter and stuff like that. So I think especially after my nan and her dog died, I think deep down now she did suffer with a bit of depression as well. So it didn't help, it added to the situation.
And then shortly after Christmas, on the 11th of January of 2021, your mum spilled hot water on herself whilst making a cup of tea, didn't she?
Yeah.
And she suffered from burns and blistering. And although it wasn't known at the time, that the shock from those burns had also caused a fracture to her pelvis.
Yeah.
And so her condition, whilst you tried to deal with it the best you could, deteriorated, and you phoned the out-of-hours service and was told that she needed to go to hospital.
Yes.
What was your mum's reaction to being told that she should go to hospital?
She said, I don't need to. I said, Mum, I can't do no more. I can't. So she said, you do know if I go, I won't be coming back. And I said, don't be so silly, you will. It's safe. And she just looked at me as if like, you don't know what, you know what you're talking about. You know that I'm telling you the truth. I will not be coming back. So the ambulance men came and she said, you sure you're going to make me do this? And I said, Mum, it's best for you. So...
And you were unable to accompany her to
Yes.
hospital. And the following day, the doctor called you to say that she'd been admitted to ward A1 to
Yeah.
treat her burns and her fracture.
Yeah.
And I think that was when you found out that she had fractured her pelvis,
Yes.
wasn't it? Yes.
Yes.
Did your mum tell you on the phone that she wanted to come home?
Yes, numerous times. And I said, you can't come home yet because they said that they're going to try and fix your fracture through doing physio. And like the physio is on site, so you need to stay in. So I said, because you can't go back and forth the toilet on your own and stuff like that. So she said, oh, okay. So she said, well, I need stuff, she said. So I took stuff up to her then and gave it to, we weren't allowed up to the ward. We had to give it to the Salvation Army in the concourse.
So you visited the hospital over the following weeks many, many times, but you weren't allowed to see her.
No.
And the only contact that you had with her was by telephone.
Yeah, on a mobile.
Were other people who were being treated in hospital able to meet up with their relatives? Were you conscious of that when you were going to and fro from the hospital?
Well, one day I was stood there because I was waiting for them to bring any dirty laundry back from my mother's ward. And I said to them, I said, there's an awful lot of people around. So they said, we don't understand it ourselves. So I
This
said,
was
well,
the Salvation Army
yes.
people that you were talking to?
Yeah. So I said, well, who are they? I said, I thought they had stopped clinics because of COVID. And they said, no, if they could come down from the wards, if your loved ones could come down from the wards to visit you, they could. So I said, so all these patients visiting people from the outside? And they said, yeah. I said, but I just don't understand that. I said, I don't understand why we can't just go to the wards then, if they're allowing patients to come down to the concourse.
In the second week of February, you became aware through the telephone calls with your mum that she was becoming quite lethargic, which was unlike her.
Yeah, and then it came to a stage where I couldn't get hold of her. And I had said to my sister, don't go phoning the hospital. If need be, I'll phone the hospital, because I knew how inundated hospitals were at that time. So I said, I'll phone the hospital. Any news, I'll pass on to you. So she said, OK, no problem. So I'm trying my mother's mobile, no answer. In the end, I phoned the hospital and I said, there was this lovely little nurse. My mother loved her. She always mentioned this one nurse when I was on the phone to her. And she said, I've noticed a change in your mother. And she said, I've asked them if she could have picked up COVID, or she needs some sort of tests doing, because she said she's been sleeping a lot. So I said, oh, well, can you ask them if they can do a COVID test then? So she said, well, I did mention it to my head nurse this morning. And she said, oh, she only had one done last week. She said, she don't need an... And she said, but there's obviously something wrong with my patient.
Yes.
So she said, I tell you what, she said, I'll tell them that the family member has phoned up and have asked for one done. So I said, OK then, thank you, which then they did. And that's a couple of hours later then the doctor phoned up and said that they needed to see us at the hospital.
Because she tested positive?
Yeah.
So you went up to the hospital?
Yeah.
And were you told almost straight away that nothing could be done for your mum?
Yes, they said that she wasn't presenting any white blood cells or some... And I said, can you just tell me, like, in normal terms, is there anything you can do for her? And they said, unfortunately, no.
And did you find out then or after your mum died how she had come to catch COVID?
Afterwards,
Right.
because I put in a complaint.
Right. Well, we'll deal with that in a moment then. But you were then able to spend some time with your mum between the time that you found out that she'd got COVID and her death.
Yes, I was allowed on the ward. I was allowed on the ward on the 4-bedded bay where she had been for the past 2 weeks, which I wasn't allowed up there before, to see her. And then I was allowed up to the ICU ward where she was at end of life.
And she was given a side room, wasn't she? When
Yes.
you say you were very grateful for that
Yeah.
and the time that you were able to spend with her. And did your sister also visit during those last days?
She did.
Once your mother had passed away, you then found out that when she had been on ward A1, when she had originally been admitted to hospital, she was placed in a bay that was very close to a COVID ward, separated only by
A wall.
a set of doors and a ward. And you also described that the standard of cleanliness and sanitation in the hospital was terrible, in your words.
Yeah, it was horrendous. It was really horrendous. I just couldn't believe what I saw, because when I had been going to the Salvation Army, there was Coke stain on the floor in the concourse. That Coke stain was there for 2 weeks while I was going back and forth that concourse.
And were you told that there hadn't been cleaners there?
Yeah, for 2 weeks.
For 2 weeks.
They tried to make out that I'd missed them. And I was up there a lot over like 4 days. I'm sure I would have seen one cleaner at least, because I said, I know up another hospital, there's a cleaner going back and forth the wards constant. So I said, I didn't see one cleaner. And then when I done the complaint, then they found out that there hadn't been no cleaners for 2 weeks.
Prior to your mum testing positive for COVID, and whilst she had been in hospital, had she become eligible for a vaccination?
Yes.
And did you receive that appointment letter?
Yes, I opened a letter while she was in hospital, because it was from a hospital letter.
Yes.
And knowing that she was in hospital, I just wanted to see what it was.
And that had been her appointment
Yeah.
letter? Following your mum's death, were you offered any bereavement support or counselling?
No, nothing at all. I suffer with depression, and the only counselling I had was because I went to my own GP in about 2 years after my mother's death, because I said I need help. And they put me on to one of the NHS counsellors. But I had about 8 things of that. And it seems like you're telling them, by the time you've told them everything, it stops. And it's like you're on your own again. There's
Have you?
nobody else.
Sorry to interrupt you. Have you found support from the Welsh COVID bereaved group?
Yes.
How has that supported you?
Because we can tell each other how we feel and we can relate more to each other. And if it wasn't for the group and to get in, there wouldn't be nobody.
Whilst you were in hospital in the last few days of your mum's life, she told you that she wanted a simple after-death process through pure cremations, didn't she?
Yeah.
Without a ceremony, and she wanted her ashes to be scattered in the sea, so that no matter where you were in the world, a little piece of her would always be with you.
Yeah.
And were you able to honour her wishes?
Yes.
You say at the end of your witness statement, Miss O'Hanlon, that having to deal with the processes of your mum dying, you felt that you were just going through the motions, and you were often confronted with a standard response when you questioned what was happening, such as it's in line with national guidance, without being given any proper consideration, but by those to whom you were from whom you were attempting to get information. You say that you continue to experience bereavement daily, and you know that that will continue. And finally, you say the circumstances in which your mum was infected with COVID-19 and died have really impacted your bereavement and have made it very difficult for you to move on.
Yes, because of what I saw, what I witnessed. Like, my mother was left in urinated bedding overnight because they didn't have no bedding for her. She was screamed at by a nurse because she didn't want to drink any more water.
And do you carry with you what you describe as guilt because you encouraged her to go into hospital and that's where she died?
Yeah, I should have gone up that one night. And I should have been there to help her, but I wasn't.
No, because you weren't allowed to go into the hospital.
And I knew if I had gone up there, I'd have ended up either being banned from the hospital or whatever. They wouldn't have allowed me in there, so
No.
I thought I needed to keep my calm, keep composed, and seeing those two girls running round with the headgear on up on the ICU unit.
Those were the nurses. Yeah.
Singing, chasing each other when people were dying.
Mrs. O'Hanlon, thank you very much for giving us your story. That concludes my questions, my lady.
Mr. O'Hanlon, I'm so sorry you've had to go through this. I don't know whether you're going to find it in any way cathartic or whether it's just re-traumatising you. I do hope it's not, but it's obviously very important that we hear from people who've lost parents or loved ones, other loved ones in a situation. I expect your life is full of what-ifs now, isn't it? Especially after that letter about the vaccination.
Yeah, well, it is really, because she wasn't just my mother, she was my best friend as well.
I can't imagine how popular you were with the local shopkeepers when you were popping out.
I used to shout at her down the aisles, "Mum, do you want your vodka?" And she never drank.
Well, at least you've got happy memories.
Yeah.
And I know in your rational moments you know that you're not to blame and you shouldn't feel guilty, but that doesn't help because rational moments aren't always there for us, are they? So thank you very much indeed for coming along to help us. I'm really grateful to you, and I know that there'll be people who can help you when you leave the hearing room.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very well. 1:30? I shall return at 1:30.
Thank you.